Welcome to this episode of Collab Lab, Collaborative Professionals of Washington's interview series in which we speak with experienced family law attorneys about how they introduce collaborative divorce to prospective clients. Our goal is to learn about the varied approaches that practitioners use to explain the process and highlight the benefits of collaborative practice. These interviews are part of CPW's ongoing efforts to support and strengthen our professional community. Hello, my name is Serin Ngai, and I work as a collaborative and cooperative divorce attorney in Seattle, Washington. I am a solo practitioner at Sound Family Solutions, PLLC. In today's episode, we're speaking with Roy Martin, a collaborative attorney in Bellingham, Washington. Thank you, Roy, for joining us and sharing your perspective.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, your collaborative practice, and how you got into collaborative law.
Sure. Well, I've been an attorney since 1996, and I was first trained in collaborative in 2001. And it completely turned my practice around and my life around. I love this kind of work. I mean, never would have stayed a divorce attorney all these years. And I love doing it to this day because it feels like we're really making a difference in people's lives.
How do you respond when someone asks you, what do you do for a living?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I tell them, I don't just say I'm an attorney. I say I'm a collaborative divorce attorney. I help people divorce with love, or something deliberately a little bit provocative, because that kind of gets a reaction usually. Really, is that possible? Or something like that. And it's the beginning of a conversation.
That's lovely. I like that. Tell me about what it looks like when a prospective client reaches out to you. How do they generally find you?
Sure.
How do they generally contact you? Walk us through that process.
Yeah, people find me in various ways. A lot of people find me through my website. I have a very active website. I've spent a lot of time through the years, not so much anymore, but years ago, really putting a lot of content in there so that people find it to be a resource. And I've also got resource pages within there where people can find other resources. Some people word of mouth or referrals from other attorneys or professionals, but a lot of people come through the website. And typically, if they don't already know me through another attorney or through a friend who used me or something like that, they'll just say something like, help, I'm going through a divorce. I need help. I'm scared. They don't really they rarely will voice the fear, but it's illuminating. It's behind everything they're saying. And so I tell them, listen, there are 4 ways of doing a divorce. And I let them talk for a little bit. And then I say, okay, let's take a minute because I don't have time to do a full consultation right now on the phone, but I can kind of give you an outline of what I do. And then if it makes sense, we can set up a consultation. There are 4 ways of doing a divorce. Some people can sit down with each other, maybe once you've gotten some legal advice and you've had some financial disclosure or other disclosures. And maybe with some coaching, because it's not easy to do, maybe you can sit down and figure this out on your own. But beware, because that's in some sense the hardest way of doing things, because you've got no support, you've got no assistance, and it's really easy for the fear to take over. And fear can really destroy a healthy divorce, the possibility of a healthy divorce, because fear causes people to not trust each other. The trust breaks down, and people start to make assumptions about each other's motives, which are usually not true. But it's a way of explaining this kind of behavior that maybe they've never seen before from a spouse. I'll talk about how fear can come from many sources, but the big ones tend to be, will I have enough money? And that comes up for both parties. And then, will the children be okay? You see that more in mothers than in fathers, but you can see it in either parent. And then the third one is, will I have enough time with the children or enough connection with the children to be able to maintain that relationship and still feel connected, or will the child feel connected to me? And that tends to, of course, be more dads than moms, but again, it can vary. And once they understand that, that it's like if you try to push when there's fear feeds fear, and you get into what I call the fear cycle, where very, very quickly all the trust can break down and people wind up in litigation. And it's really hard to recover from that. So we want to make sure that we get some intervention before that happens. So I'll say to people, be careful if you try to do this on your own, because it's not like people will assume it's all or nothing. Like it's either we can sit down and do this ourselves or we're going to wind up in court litigating. It's like there's this middle ground, and the middle ground includes things like mediation. And mediation is a complex ground because there are many different types and styles of mediation. And I'll talk a little bit about how litigators see mediation as something where people should be in different rooms, and the mediator doesn't even need to be trained as a mediator. They just need to be like an experienced attorney or a judge, somebody who can tell them what a court would do and kind of coerce them into a settlement. And I'll say, that kind of settlement, those cases do typically settle, but the settlements are not great settlements because people feel like it got rammed down their throat, just like if they went to court, because it didn't come from them. It came from their attorneys. It came from the mediator. And so you don't get what we really want, which is a durable agreement, one that at the end of the day allows both people to feel good about the outcome, which is super important to the kids because the kids need to have two parents who like each other, who have high regard for one another. Otherwise, the kids get caught in the middle, and that's the worst thing for kids. So if you want to avoid that, the kind of mediation I'll recommend, so I'll talk a little bit about the other kinds of mediation. So facilitative mediation, and I'll talk a little bit about a transformative model where the focus is more on the relationship itself, but that works for some folks, not for everyone, because that can feel like marriage counseling. But if you can do it, if you can really get to the point where you see through each other's eyes, what I like about when I'm mediating that way is that I can step back and I don't have to guide them to solutions, because once they get to that place of mutual empathy, those who can do it, the solutions just arise naturally because they both become more generous typically. They both become more caring and kind. It's like the love returns to the marriage long enough to get these great settlements that typically are durable. But there are lots of different styles, and we can go into a more middle ground, a ground which is more about just helping them have an effective conversation. And in that scenario, I will typically give some legal information, not legal advice. I can also be an attorney in a mediation process. I don't have to be the mediator. So somebody else can come in as the mediator and I can represent one of them. And that if I consult with one of them, then from that point forward, I can only be that person's attorney. I can no longer be the mediator. Then I'll talk about collaborative law, and I'll explain a little bit more in depth all of the support that comes from a collaborative approach and all of the emotional containment, how it's the approach that really brings to bear the most. I'll say to people, if money is not an object and you have kids, I would recommend collaborative divorce, period. If you've got $30 million between you, it's a no-brainer. Like, why on earth would you not want to do it collaboratively when we have a coach to help to guide you in terms of keeping your hearts open to one another, to really hear each other, to get in touch with what's really important to you, not only in this moment, but what will be important to you years from now, looking back on it, and help you align around your values and come out of this, not just with not causing harm, but maybe even some healing. For the children, to have a child specialist, somebody who's, again, like the coach, not there to do therapy, but has those skills and can use them to help ascertain the children's needs, their normal developmental needs, but also their unique idiosyncratic needs based on who they are and what they're experiencing in this moment, and bring that to the foreground so the two of you can really focus on what's most important as you craft the parenting plan. Because you want to come out of that on the other side being that kind of couple that ultimately can be sitting on the sidelines together at the soccer game with your new spouses, with your other children or stepchildren or whatever, and afterwards all go out to brunch together, right? But to get that, it's not necessarily easy. You have to earn it. And this is how you earn it. And then I'll talk about the financial neutral as well, somebody who can bring together all of the financial pieces, all of the assets, all of the income, all of the debts, put it in a report, send it out to all of us, and then work with them to start to brainstorm options, to look at different scenarios. What would it look like if we did it this way? What would it look like if we did it that way? And help them come to something that meets as many needs as possible. And so that they can exit the marriage in a way that feels good and workable and also fair. And if there is pain, because often there is financial pain because most people aren't wealthy, how do we divide even the pain in a way that feels fair to us? And then I'll talk about litigation too. I'll want to say to them, listen, litigation isn't dark and evil. I don't want to give you that impression. It has its place. It's kind of like the hospital emergency room. If you need it, thank God it's there, but nobody in their right mind should want to be there if they don't need it, because it's expensive, it's painful, it's terrifying, and it doesn't lead to great outcomes. But sometimes it's the best outcome you can get. So when would that be? If somebody's hiding assets, hiding income, running up debts, if somebody's harming their children or threatening to harm their children, if they're harming you or threatening to harm you, or if somebody has either a personality disorder or a mental health issue that prevents them from seeing a point of view other than their own, where everything that comes from me is all right and beautiful and true, and everything from you is dark and evil, that's not going to work. Or if there are children and their addictions that are not being addressed head on, that can get in the way of the parenting, and it can make it so that collaborative won't work.
That It brings up an interesting question. Do you bring up domestic violence in your consultations? Do you screen for it? How do you touch
Yeah.
upon that
Yeah,
subject?
absolutely. Yeah, I screen for everything. I screen for mental health issues, for domestic violence, for addictions. I actually ask, like, what is causing this marriage to end? And people will tell me all kinds of stuff. It's fascinating. But I think it's important because when I meet with the other attorney, that I'm able to say, like, here are the needs that are moving from my client. And here's what he sees or she sees. Here's why the marriage is ending from his point of view or her point of view. And I want to know that about the other party too.
Tell me a little bit about some nuts and bolts about your initial consultations. What's the length of your consultations typically? Do you charge a fee ahead of time? What information might you collect ahead of time? That type of
Yeah.
stuff.
So I don't collect information ahead of time. I collect it all at the consultation, during the consultation. People will sometimes try to send me stuff and I'll be like, if I'm going to read it, I'm going to read it during the consultation. But I block off up to 2 hours and I tell them it's not going to take that long. Usually it's about an hour, sometimes a little bit more. But I want to have plenty of time so we don't have to rush. And in case we really do need the 2 hours, it's there. I tell them that my normal hourly rate is $400, but I'm going to charge $500 for this meeting. And if we do use more than the typical hour, an hour and a quarter, you're going to get a good deal because you're getting all that for $500. But the reason I do it that way is because it takes away the stress and it gives us the space in which to really explore in an open-ended way. Over a lot of years, I found that that's what works best for me. When I first started, I didn't charge for consultations, and I found that I got a lot of people who would take advantage of that and then go somewhere else for services. I mean, not a lot, but it happened enough times that I just kind of said, somebody has to value what I do enough to be willing to pay for it. When I was new at it, I didn't charge very much. I think I charged $100 for a consultation or something. This was a long time ago, so it was probably like charging $200 today. But I was definitely giving a discounted rate, and that's okay if you're starting out. But I mean, honestly, it's a lot easier to build a practice today than it was back then. There's a lot less competition, so it shouldn't even be necessary.
And so do your potential clients, are they already aware that you're a collaborative attorney, or are some clients not aware of what you do and you
Yeah,
provide them with that information then?
it varies. I mean, I think if people have read my website carefully, and some do, some have read every page, every blog, have really spent time, because it would take a long time to go through the whole thing. Some do, and then they know what I do, and some come from other sources like former clients or other attorneys or other professionals, and so they know what I do. But many don't. Many are just saying, hey, I'm looking around for a divorce attorney. I saw your name online. You had good reviews. And that's a typical one where they haven't really looked at my website at all, but they've seen some reviews. So I'm giving you a call. I've called a bunch of other people too. What can you tell me?
Yeah.
And those people have no idea. And so I'll tell them, hey, listen, I'm not for everyone. I don't litigate. I used to. I don't anymore. I've given it up. But that was to focus on helping people stay out of court. So I mediate, I collaborate. Sometimes I just help people in various ways, like consultations and preparing settlement documents.
Got it. And do you ever talk about in your consultations why the marriage has gotten to this point, or if there's a possibility of reconciliation? Do you go into those types of details?
I'll ask about reconciliation only to get a sense of where they're coming from, not to try to help them reconcile. I want to understand the feelings and needs of both parties going into it. And so it's important to know, like, who's ending the marriage, or is it something that's mutual? Where are they each at about it? And so I will ask what happened, what went wrong, what's causing the marriage to end.
Got it. During a typical consult, what would you say are the questions that you typically get asking about collaborative law, and how do you respond to those?
Yeah, people will say it sounds very expensive to have all those professionals. And I'll say, I never sell it as a cheap option. It's going to be more expensive. It's more expensive than mediation, unless you're spinning your wheels in mediation, in which case mediation can be ineffective and too expensive. It's more expensive than sitting down on your own. But if you're sitting down on your own and you're not getting anywhere, or you're making things worse, then obviously that's not working. So you have to kind of do a cost-benefit analysis. Sometimes a collaborative case is cheaper than litigation, but not always. So let's say on a typical collaborative case is probably about the same as a litigated case that settles on the courthouse steps. But you get a much better outcome. You have a much better process that isn't traumatic for you or for the children, and that leads to far better outcomes. And so, as long as your case is well suited to it, we don't, the only thing worse than litigation is litigation following a failed collaborative case. So that's why we're screening for it, because if you're not the right candidates for this, I'm going to tell you so. Or if I have concerns, I'm going to tell you about those. If I see yellow flags, I'm going to be really out in the open about all of that because I'm not trying to sell you anything. I want you to do whatever's best for you. But, I've had people who have said, I understand that there's a really high chance that this one's going to fail and I'm willing to take that risk and let's try it anyway. So as long as they go in with that kind of, like I'll say, typically the fail rate is like 3 to 5%, really small. But I might say for your case, I think it's 50-50. And somebody might say, I want to do it anyway. And I'll say, okay, as long as you understand that, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Do you find those cases where you think it was like a 50-50 chance of failing? Were they successful at the end, or was it truly they had to terminate?
Well, I mean, it's probably been about 50-50 on those cases.
Uh-huh.
And I don't view termination necessarily as failure in that context, because often whatever they were able to do within the case survives, and they go on to litigate the pieces that they couldn't resolve. Like that can happen around, let's say, an unaddressed addiction, like where it's clear that somebody's not willing to address it head on. Typically they'll say going in, well, I will. And then you get into the case and they won't, or they start going into denial. It's so easy to get hooked in that setting, the financial piece. They might even decide they want to codify the financial piece, like get it down in writing and sign it before they terminate the collaborative process.
Right. So if a client does appear interested in pursuing a collaborative divorce, what do you typically suggest would be the next steps? Do you contact the other party or give referrals? What would be your next steps?
Well, even before that, before I've consulted with clients, often when I'm just talking to them on the phone and telling them the options, and they're like, wow, you've given me a lot of information. And I'll say, depending on where they are, like if it's clear that they're doing this kind of on the stealth because they haven't said anything to the other partner yet, I might say, all right, if you decide you want to consult, let me know. But I might also say, listen, if you wind up having conversations with your spouse, or if they've already done that, I'll say, show your spouse my website. Because the moment you say attorney to the other person, they get scared. But we want to dispel that fear. And if they see my website and they see what I do, I think they're going to see that they don't have to be scared of me. At least that's my hope. You can have them call me. We haven't consulted. I'm happy to give them the same information I've given you. I can spend 5 or 10 minutes on the phone with them, just like I've done with you. Or you can call me back together and I'll tell you the same information we just went over together. And then you guys can decide how you want to move forward. And you can move forward either with me as the mediator, if you decide to go that route, or if you want to consult with attorneys, one of you can consult with me and the other one can consult with another collaborative attorney. I might send them to you. And then we get a case together, potentially.
Yeah. So after the consultation ends, do you do any follow-up afterwards with the client or a potential client or anything like that? Okay.
That would feel like chasing people. I don't want to do that. They know enough about me now that if it's the right fit, they'll come back. And I don't really want to have clients where it's not the right fit anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'll even say to people sometimes, here's the list of all the collaborative attorneys in town. Talk to several of us. Find the one that feels like the best match for you and then consult with that person. If it's me, that's great. But if it's not, that's fine. There are plenty of clients out there. That's not the issue. Yeah.
What would you say are the best ways to build relationships with other collaborative practitioners in advance of having cases together?
Yeah. If we've never had a case together, my assumption is the first time we do a case, we're probably going to step on each other's toes a few times. I'll say, hey, can we either get together for lunch or can we at least set up a Zoom meeting or a phone call? And let's set aside some time, like at least an hour, so we can talk to each other and get to know each other's preferences and styles and philosophies. And during that meeting, I'll tell people about the things that I struggle with, because despite the fact that I've been doing this it'll be 30 years. I mean, not collaborative law for 30 years. It'll be 25 years this year in April. Despite that, I was good at certain things from day one and other things I struggle with to this day and always will. As we get older, we recognize our own strengths and our own challenges. And I'll be real vulnerable. Like I'll say, I'm probably a little on the spectrum. So I don't always catch all the feelings that are moving in the room. I tend to focus on facts and things like that. And so there may be times when I'm not noticing something that's important and I might need you to let me know. It might be helpful if you're tuned into that and I'm not. I'll say to people, I'm willing to be transparent. If we're in a Zoom meeting, I mean, you can try sending me a private chat, but if I don't see it, it's okay to say, hold up a second. Can we have a private meeting, the attorneys? Or you can even go further. And if you don't think it's going to really embarrass me, just say, hey, Roy, I'm wondering if, and just put it out there in a polite way. And I'm generally fine with that. But we've got to get to know each other's dance moves, because some people are fine with that and other people aren't. Other people are like, if you're going to say anything like that, it needs to be just between us. That's one of the discussions I'll have. If I'm seeing something and it's not working, how do you want me to handle it? Eventually, we'll know each other so well that we won't have those problems. But the first time through, I expect we probably will. And it's okay. It's not really a problem. It's like, in a way, we're modeling what we're asking them to do anyway. So that's kind of like why I like to do it out in the open, because if we can do that, then they can see us doing it.
Yeah, then that makes sense. One of the primary purposes of these interviews is to help practitioners improve how they talk about collaborative with prospective clients. I'm just wondering, do you have any words of wisdom for newer practitioners who are trying to increase their collaborative caseload?
Yeah, I would say number one, it's great to listen to people like me who've been doing it a long time, but you're going to develop your own style. Take it and then sit with it. But then ultimately, you need to focus on what works for you, because you're not me and you're not somebody else who's got a lot of experience. You're you. And you may develop something new that nobody else has ever done. And collaborative has really advanced tremendously across the years I've been practicing. I mean, from 2001 until today, it's like a completely different animal. It's so much better now. And that's come from tiny little contributions that each of us has made along the way. You'll have an insight, I'll have an insight, and that insight will get out into the community, and other people will say, wow, that's really cool. And so it builds and builds and grows. Things that were once startling, like everything's motivated by fear, is now obvious. Everybody knows that. But how did that happen? At some point, somebody had to have that insight. Oh my goodness, I'm noticing that fear is underneath everything. I find that if you can help people to be vulnerable, then cases open. If they can get to a place where they can look underneath the fear, usually fear is masking either hurt, or anger is typically masking either hurt or fear. So if they can talk about that, if they can talk about what's under the surface, and then you get to the real conversation. What are you afraid of, or what are you hurt about? It was really great some years back. I guess we're going to be doing it again when CPW brought in Bill Eddy, because before then, if we had a case that was failing, the only way we knew how to deal with it was to lock them in a room and not let them use the bathroom and just like try to force settlement, right? And that never really worked very well. But Bill brought techniques through for people who can't do what I'm talking about, because there are people, not a lot, but he says 10, 15%, that's probably about right, who, if you try to go into the feelings, there's so much there, there's so much wounding, there's so much trauma that it just opens a floodgate. And so with them, you have to help to keep them in their rational minds. If you see that coming, that's not a collaborative case. But if you get into one and it becomes obvious that that's what you're dealing with, and you don't want to abandon them, and you don't want the case to terminate, and you think there's a possibility of getting them through to the end, because litigation is no picnic.
Right.
And it's probably not going to get a better result, then using his techniques can be really helpful. But I know I strayed from your question. Remind me what your question is.
No, you're about there. It was just about, what words of wisdom do you have for newer practitioners who are trying to increase their collaborative caseload, and how to improve their ability to talk about collaborative to potential clients?
Well, so let me jump in on that. So in terms of improving the way you talk about it, I don't know. I just talk, and some people like me and some don't. I don't really focus too much on that. I try to give away everything I have. I try to do that on my website. I try to do that in person. There's nothing that I'm holding for myself. I want to share. But in terms of building practice, if you have a litigation practice, it can be really hard to make the transition because you're afraid of giving up the old for the new. But you need time to build a collaborative practice. So you need to either scale back the litigation enough so that it's not strangling the rest of your intentions, or even, as I did in my case, just completely say, okay, I'm letting go of that because I can't. It's like I really need the freedom. And if my income drops for a while, my income drops, and I'll find some other way of dealing with it. The first time I did that, my income did drop for a while. But the second time, when I moved up here to Washington and I litigated for a couple of years and then I transitioned, the transition was seamless. Probably because I was doing a mixed practice then. So giving up the litigation and moving totally into collaborative was easier. And enough people knew me that there were plenty of cases. But it's important to have the time to be able to work on your website so that people can see who you are. You have your own unique signature. It comes through in the way you talk about this work. It comes through in the way you write about this work. And so you need to write on your own website in a way that people get a sense of you. And that takes time, and go through many iterations. I know I certainly did. In fact, even every once in a while, I'll still update my website. Not too often, but I'll get some new idea. And it's like, wow, I'm a different person. So I'll want to put it on my website. Get to know other practitioners, not just practitioners, but not just attorneys, but certainly financial neutrals and mental health practitioners, but also just people in the community. I mean, when you get your hair cut, people who deal with that, they talk to everyone about everything. So if you can tell them, hey, I'm a collaborative divorce attorney, because I'll always ask you, what do you do if they don't know you? And so that gives you perfect opportunity to tell them and get into a really interesting conversation about it. And that can really lead to referrals, where suddenly somebody's coming to you and saying, I was getting my hair cut and I was telling them about my divorce and they gave me your number. So just assume that it's going to come from everywhere and anywhere. Kind of like if you were single and you wanted to meet somebody, and like you learn that you have to be kind of ready in every moment to meet the one, because it might happen on the bus. It might happen when you drop your change on the floor and suddenly somebody's helping you pick up your dimes and nickels. And it's the same thing. It's like you have to be ready in the moment because the connections come from anywhere.
Thank you so much, Roy, for sharing your insights and experience with us today. Really appreciated it, and I really enjoyed talking to you and learning from you. If you would like to learn more about Roy Martin, you can visit his website at creativedivorce.com. Thank you for listening to this episode of Collab Lab. We hope you found this discussion helpful as you think about how to introduce collaborative divorce to prospective clients in your own practice. Thank you, and stay tuned for the next one.